so excited for you to join me today with this Granny Summer House top. This is a fun and easy stitch to do. We will be incorporating some of your original basic granny squares at the bottom, and it has a wide neck, which is really nice for those summer months, and a little bit of an open stitch so that it can be breathable when the weather is really, really hot. We've got some scallop edgings on the top of here and on the end of the sleeves. And really, when it comes to this, you can choose to work it in any colors that you want. I'll also be talking today about turning this into a dress, because that is very easy to do, as well as working this in a solid on the top if you don't want to do the striping. If we're doing the striping, we're going to be joining at the end of each round, but if we're not, we can work this continuously. So let's talk about the yarn to make this Granny Summer House crochet top. Now, this version that I made here and the dress version, I use the Comfy Fingering Weight by We Crochet. This is 218 yards per 15 grams. It's a really soft cotton, so don't run away from cottons, especially the comfy cottons for summer. This is not scratchy. This is super soft and has an amazing drape. Today on camera, I'm going to be trying out the Twister Solids by Hobbii. This is a 55% cotton, 45% acrylic, and this one has a lot of yardage. It has 437 yards per cake. I'm going to be doing my solid color work in the light pink, and then my striping is going to be in these 3 additional colors. All this yarn will be linked inside of the pattern. Now, I also want to note that this yarn is labeled a sport weight yarn, but I'm going to be completely honest with you. When I compare it against Comfy, it swatches and gauges exactly the same as the Comfy Fingering Weight. Sometimes yarn companies, they put the weight on there, but it's always good to do a gauge swatch to know if something that might be labeled a 2 really can swatch the same as something that is labeled a 1. Of course, we will also need a crochet hook for this pattern today. I'll be using a G4mm hook. Be sure to check the gauge, do a gauge swatch for this one, and if you need to change your hook size, go ahead. We just want to make sure that the gauge swatch is correct so that it sizes appropriately. You'll also want a couple of stitch markers, a yarn needle to weave in those ends, as well as scissors. Now, there's one more tool I want to talk about that is really useful when it comes to doing granny squares. Now, another option to block these is this blocking wooden pegboard. This is amazing for just quickly and easily. I just spray these squares and then I bring them over to my board where I have my pegs pre-done in the size that I need, and it's great for granny squares. I just throw the corners on to each peg and then I just kind of let it sit overnight or half a day, and then these granny squares are blocked perfect and ready for me to seam them together, and it makes them look really nice and crisp. So I'll also include this link in the pattern and on the blog as well, because this is one of my favorite granny square tools now. Now, when it comes to picking colors for your sweater, it's really nice to try it out on a granny square to see how you like the color combinations together. I made so many different ones before I settled on the colors that I wanted to do in the order that I wanted to do them in. And it's a great idea to practice by starting with this granny square. Now, to get started, I'm going to start with my main color. This is going to be the top. We'll come back and do the scallops later, but this is worked top down. I love top down because we can try it on as we go and see if we like the sizing. I've also included in the pattern ways to increase and decrease to adjust and customize the sizing as well. But we're going to get started with our solid color, and I will be changing colors for this, but I'm also going to show you how to do the top part and the body as a solid color. And when we work in a solid color, there's no need to join. We can work continuously in the round, which just makes it a little bit better if we're not doing the color changes. I will also be showing the color changes for this one I'm making because I think it's really fun to do. And when we're doing color changes, we don't want what is called a jog, and that's like where the colors are off if we were to work continuously. We want to join if we are doing color work because we don't want it to have it be weird between rounds. So I'm going to be starting with this gorgeous pink color, and we'll be chaining 120 chains no matter what size that you are working. Now, on camera today, I'm going to be making the extra small. Now, normally I wouldn't wear an extra small, but the reason why I want to show it is because I've made this one in a small, and these are oversized. So I've left a lot of ease for this to be a certain style, a little bit, more roomy of a style. And I also want to show what it would look like if it was a bit more fitted So I'm going to be looking at the bust sizes when I choose my sizes. And for this next one, if I want something more fitted, I'm going to go down a bust size. That's why it's always smart to look at the bust sizes of a pattern in the ease versus just saying, oh, I'm normally a medium. Because if you choose a medium, which is great, it's going to be oversized. If you want something more fitted, go down to a small. So I'm going to show an extra small on the camera today. It'll work up quicker for me, but no matter what size you're working, you will follow all the same basic instructions. This pattern can be purchased in my shops as well as it will be free on the blog. Now, if you are doing a solid color and you want to work continuously, you're going to do the same amount of chains. I'm going to show this in a smaller sample here. You're going to start with the same stitch count, and when you get to the very first chain in this round, we're not going to join. We're going to go ahead and work 3 single crochets into that very first stitch and mark the very first stitch of your round. So I'm going to work 3 single crochets into the very first chain stitch of this round, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark that very first stitch just so we get an idea of where that is at. And now we're going to skip 2 stitches and double crochet into the next chain stitch. And we're going to be repeating that all the way around. So we will skip 2 stitches and then double crochet 3 into the next. Now when we get back to the beginning, we have our very first 3 single crochet stitches. We're actually going to be skipping those and going to the next space between those single crochet and those double crochet stitches, and we're going to work directly into that space. And you can go ahead and mark the first stitch of this round just to keep track of how many rounds that you're doing. But then from here on out, it gets really, really simple to work continuously without needing to join, which helps it just look a bit more seamless if we're working in a solid color. So notice like that these 3 stitches kind of get skipped here in order for us to keep going. We're not skipping a stitch count. They're just kind of like lazily hanging out as we get going. And as we work around, now everything in these spaces will be a 3 double crochet. So you'll keep on going, working in that stitch pattern. But as we get back to the beginning over here, notice we're just going to just keep on working into the spaces between those 3 double crochet stitches. Now to get started with any size, once you have chained 120 with the main color of your summer house sweater, we are going to be joining to the very first chain stitch. Now make sure that you're not twisting your chain as you go. Be very careful. Sometimes I double and triple check this to make sure that there are no twists in this chain as I go ahead and slip stitch to join. And I do like to work into the back humps, but honestly for this one, it's not necessary. It's not going to make a big difference how you work into this chain because we're going to be doing things on both sides of it. We'll be doing a scallop edge on the other side later. So I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch to join. And now we're ready to start doing our granny stitch pattern. So in this very first stitch, I'm going to insert my hook and we're going to do a stacked single crochet, which means I'm going to pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both loops. And now we're going to go back through that left bar over here where we insert, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. Now this is the very first stitch in this row. I actually like metal markers for this one just because they're less heavy to mark these lighter weight yarns. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the very first stitch of this row, which was the stacked single crochet. And now we're going to double crochet 2 more stitches into that same beginning chain space. And now here comes our repeat around. We are going to skip 2 chains, being careful not to skip more than 2. Sometimes when we work 3 into 1, it tightens the chain after. So we're going to skip 2 chains, and then in the next chain, we are going to do 3 double crochets. And notice as I'm placing 3 double crochets into a chain, it really pulls on that chain space. You can kind of pull the bottom of the chain to bring it back down a bit. And now we're going to skip 2 again. So skip 2 and 3 double crochet into the next chain. And we are going to repeat that all the way around for round 1 and then come on back. Now that we've made it all the way around, we are going to slip stitch into the very first stitch of this round, and then we are going to slip stitch until we get to this space. So I'm going to slip stitch into the next one and the next one. And now we're at this space between these sets of 3 double crochets. What we're going to do next is we're going to be starting our next round in this space. So we're going to start by inserting that space and doing a stacked single crochet, and then 2 more double crochets into that space. Next, we are going to be doing an increase round. So for this round, we'll be setting ourselves up to do some increasing because we will want our yoke to increase. No matter what size you're doing, you'll be following these same directions. Now next, we're going to be doing 3 double crochets into the next 2 spaces. We're going to 3 double crochet into the next space, and the next one. And now for this 4th space, so we've done 3, in this 4th space of this round, we are going to double crochet 4. And this is where we will be increasing. On the next round, we'll finish our increase, and we'll also be changing colors, but this is setting us up so we can increase on the next round. So I've double crocheted 4. The next steps we'll do to finish out this round is we will be doing 3 sets of 3 double crochets, and then we'll do in the 4th space 4 double crochets. So we'll do 3 double crochets into the next 3 spaces. And now into that 4th space, we're going to double crochet 4. And we're going to continue that all the way around. So we will do 3 double crochets into the next 3 spaces and then 4 double crochets into the next, repeating that all the way around. And at the end of this round, we will have 130 stitches and a total of 40 granny groups. And now after doing round 2, we are ready for round 3. We are going to slip stitch to join, and then we will be slip stitching to our first space over here. But if you are changing colors, when you get to your last slip stitch, you're going to insert your hook and grab your new color. You can decide whatever order you want to do your colors in, but we're going to yarn over and pull through with that new color. I like to go ahead and fasten off the first main color I used. You can carry your yarn, but where it's such an open stitch, I like to make sure that the colors are hidden and you can't see anywhere that it would be carried, but it wouldn't be too noticeable if you did want to carry it. So now we're going to be working into that very first chain space with our new, not chain space, I'm sorry, granny space with our new color. We're going to start with a stacked single crochet, and then we're going to do 2 more double crochets into that stitch. Now remember on the previous round, we had done some spaces where we had double crocheted 4. So this is where we really start to see where those increases will be because we set it up on the previous round. So I'm going to be doing 3 double crochets into the chain spaces until I get to where we did the 4 double crochet group. And this is where it really helps increasing quickly if we need to, because now in this space, we are going to be working in between the center of those 4. So you have your 4 stitches, and we're going to go right in the middle of those 4 stitches, leaving 2 on each side, and we are going to double crochet 3. It's really not much of a noticeable increase, but it will help us increase stitches for the yoke. And now I'm simply going to be working in those spaces between stitches until I get to that next group of 4. And here's where we come up on our next group of 4. And that's where right in that center between those 4 stitches, we're going to double crochet 3. And then we'll just keep on working this around. And what this does is it increases our granny groups to 50. So if you want to do a quick count of all these granny groups, you can count through and there will be 50 of them. Or that is also 150 stitches at the end of round 3. So I'll keep on going for round 3. Now for round 4, we're simply going to join to the first in the round, the first stitch, and slip stitch to that first space, the next space. And this is where we're just simply going to be working around without doing any increasing. So we're going to start by doing that stack single crochet, double crocheting 2 more into that space, and mark the first stitch of these rounds if you need to keep track of it. And now in every single space, we're just going to do 3 double crochet stitches into that space and work that all the way around. And for the next round, for round 5, we will be changing colors again. Now for round 5, we are going to slip stitch to the first stitch of round 4, and then slip stitch to that space, and we are going to be changing colors. I'm going back to my main color, and then we're going to be repeating the last round again. So we're simply just going to repeat what we did on the last round, which is working those 3 double crochet stitches into each stitch around. Now for round 6, we're going to be doing a setup again to increase. So we'll be doing some groups of 4 double crochets to set up for those increases. So I'm going to slip stitch until I get to the first space over here, this next space. And now we're going to start by doing a stacked single crochet and 2 double crochets. Now in the next 3 spaces, we will work 3 double crochet stitches. Now we're about to do the 5th space in this round. So we've done 4 sets of 3 double crochets, and now we're going to do 4 double crochets into the next. So our repeat around for this one is for the next 4 spaces, we will do 3 double crochets in each. And then in the next one, we will do 4 double crochets into that one. And we'll repeat that all the way around. Now we will still have 50 groups of granny stitches, but we'll be increasing our stitch count to 160 stitches. And then on round 7, we're going to be switching colors again. And then we'll be continuing to do those increases, and I'll come back for that round. Now for round 7, we're going to first go ahead and slip stitch until one before that next space, and then on this one we're going to go ahead and yarn over with our new color. And of course we're going to start this round the same way with a stacked single crochet and 2 double crochet stitches. Now for this round, we're going to be doing the second part of this increase. This is where it really matters. We've set ourselves up on the previous round, but this is where we will be doing the 3 double crochet stitches into each space. But when we get to the double crochet 4, that's where we will do our increase. So here where there's a double crochet 4, we're going to go right in the center of those. And we can use this increase as you're working down the sides if you want more space or if you want to make your sleeves wider, whatever you want to add fabric. This is the way to do an increase. It takes 2 rounds to do it, but it looks quite nice. So for this round, I'm going to keep working around increasing. And at the end of this round 7, we will have a total of 60 granny groups, which is 180 stitches. Now for the rest of this yoke, it's going to continue to work in the same pattern that we have been working. I'm going to be adding one more color to this, but honestly, you could stripe it all you want. You could add more colors if you wanted. But for this example, you'll see where this yoke changed colors 3 times. And there's some increasing going on in here as well. And then there will be some rounds. Let me move this up just a little bit. There will be some rounds of non-increasing until we get for this divide for the sleeve. So just be one large yoke where we'll be doing some increasing, some color changing, but we'll be doing all those steps similar to what we have just done. Now for size extra small, which I'm working on camera today, we will be doing a total of 17 rounds. So you'll work through round 17. And at the end of that round, we'll have a total of 270 stitches and 90 granny groups. And then we're just going to be going to our arm depth. So when I get to that point, when I'm at round 17, I'm going to come back and talk about that. So now that I am through round 17, I've done all the increasing that needs to be done. We're at our stitch count. For other sizes, you will be continuing to do a bit more increasing. But for all the sizes, at some point, we will be going to the arm depth measurements. And for this size for extra small, we're going to continue to work just working in the granny stitch pattern, no more increasing, for a total of 21 rounds. So I have a total of 21 rounds from our very first round. And then we're going to go ahead and go to the next steps of splitting for the arms and the body. But before you do, it's always a good idea to try it on to make sure that the arm depth works for you, that it's not too tight, that it's not too loose, because it can be different for everyone. This is what will determine where that sleeve is going to start underneath the arm. So I'm going to keep on going for a few more rounds, and I'll come back when I have a total of 21 rounds. Now, once you have all of your rounds done and you have checked the measurement, so you're going to check the arm depth to make sure it's the depth that you want. The best thing to do is to try it on, but you also want to measure it to make sure that it hits there, because sometimes when you're doing crochet, if the height of the stitch is off for a pattern like this with top down, you can always add more rows or have less rows. It's the width of the stitch that really matters on this style for fit. So this is where you'll want to adjust by adding more or less rounds in order to get the arm depth that you need. And then after that, it is time for us to split for the body and the sleeves. This is one of my favorite parts. We're going to take this from being just a simple round shape into something that will start to look more like something we can wear. Now, when we're splitting for the arms and the body, I like to start working continuously from here on out. If you want to keep joining and using the same method we just did, you can keep doing that. Sometimes it's not that noticeable, but you can kind of see the line where we joined is. So if you want to work it continuously, I find the best way to do that is to start in this first space. I've slipped from the last round, I've slip stitched over. And we can start the same way we have if we're going to continue to do it as a join, where we start with a stacked single crochet. But if you want to work continuously on this first round, and this will be underneath your arm, so it's not going to really show, I'm going to start with 3 single crochet stitches instead of 3 double crochet stitches. And that's simply just going to help it work in the round when we get back to this first stitch in the round, and we're not going to be joining. Now what we'll be doing is working the 3 double crochet stitches into the next space, and we're going to do this for a while. So we're going to be working like the front, then we're going to skip some stitches for the first arm, then we'll work the back stitches, and we'll skip some stitches for the second arm, and we'll be doing some chains on when we skip the stitches for the arms to add some more width there so that it fits just right. So for this size extra small, we are going to be doing a total of 26 spaces. So we did our first space, and now we'll do 25 more spaces that each have 3 double crochets. Now, after working the first 26 spaces from where we started, we are going to chain 7, and then we are going to skip 19 spaces. And after skipping 19, we will work 3 double crochet stitches into that next space. And this is what forms that arm. So you can see where we have skipped here. We've done the 7 chains, skipped 19 spaces, and now we are going to work 3 double crochet stitches into the next 26 spaces. Now, if you need more space on the front of this, this is where we can make adjustments. Let's say you have a larger bust size that you know you're going to need a bit more on the front than the back. This is where we can adjust, and we can still do the same size of arm, but we can do a few more spaces on the front than we are working on the back. So you might do something like 28 spaces on the front and 26 on the back to give it a bit more in the front for your chest if you want to. Now, after working the back side of this, I've worked 26 stitches. This is where we're going to once again chain 7. We're doing this for the other arm, and then we're going to skip the last 19. So we're back at the first stitch of this round. But where we don't want to join and slip stitch over, we're going to go right into that next space there after our first stitch of the round, and we're going to work 3 double crochet stitches. And this is where you will want to move a stitch marker to keep track of your rounds, because we're not going to be joining, so that they'll be a little bit harder to identify. Now we're going to be working all the way around this again, but when we work across these chain spaces, we'll just be working them in pattern as we did when we started with our first chain space. So I'm going to show you how to work across those here. So for the body, I'm just simply going to be doing 3 double crochet stitches in each space until I get to that next chain, and I'm going to show you how to work across the chain. Now that we are at those chains, we're going to go ahead and do 3 double crochets into that first chain. And then we're going to skip 2 chains and do 3 double crochets into the next. And you might have more chains than 7 depending on the size that you're making. You're just going to follow these same instructions across all the chain spaces. And then we'll skip 2 chains again and work 3 double crochets into that last chain. And now we're set up to continue working all the way around. And the way that this will work continuously, we're just going to keep going and going until we get the length of the body that we want. Now I want to take a minute and talk about doing the body stitches. Now they're going to be very simple in that we're just going to keep working around this body portion down here until it gets the length that we want before we put on the squares. So you want to do it the length that you want, but then remember that we're also going to be adding the length of the squares along the bottom as well. Unless you don't want to, and that's fine. You can just keep going and not have it have granny squares. But I also want to talk about shaping in this area. Now the best way for me to show an example of shaping would be on something like a dress. So I did decide to make this with the comfy cotton in a longer dress. I mean, it's a short dress, but just longer than a sweater down the sides. So I left the sleeves as they were after splitting and just did the shell stitch edging that I did the same thing on the top. I just did that around the short sleeves. And then I did end up decreasing a bit on the sides as I worked it down. So from the underarm, I wanted to decrease towards my waistline. I wanted it to look a bit more fitted. So I'm going to show you how to do some decreasing. And I would decrease along each side and I kept trying it on until it was what I wanted. And then you can see all of a sudden right here it flares back out. And that is because you can kind of see I went every other stitch. I did a double crochet of 4, which meant on the next round it was increasing by quite a bit. So when I went around, once I started to want to flare it out, I would do a double crochet 4 every other space. And then I worked the round after that, as you know, we worked when we were increasing the yoke. And then I did that again. So I did that twice. I ended up once again, this was the first round I did some increasing, and then I worked the round after that. And then I did some increasing again where I did a double crochet 4. Then I did 3 double crochets for 2 spaces and then a double crochet 4. So I increased again the round after that. You can honestly increase for a skirt as much or as little as you want. If you want a dress that doesn't flare out in this area, but just simply, you know, is a tighter dress that goes over your hips, you can just do more gentle increasing. You can increase along the sides if you want, not have to increase as much at once. And you can do it that way as well. But I wanted this to end up kind of being almost like a tea dress where it really flared out at the bottom, and it looks, I'm still weaving in my ends here, but still looks really nice coming to that bottom edge where I just attached those granny squares. So let's talk about, we know how to increase. Let's talk about how to do some decreasing if you did want to shape this towards your waistline. Now, when it comes to decreasing, I'm just going to show an example here. If I wanted to decrease in a spot, I am simply going to double crochet 2 into the next spot, and then in the next I'll double crochet 3. So now in the next round, when we're doing a decrease, we have this area of the 2 double crochets, and in order for us to decrease our fabric, we're going to be skipping this first space, and we're going to do 3 double crochets in the center of that 2 double crochet. And then we're also going to be skipping the space after it and continue working that in pattern. So we can see that this is where we have eliminated a space. And then as we do the next round, when we're working our granny stitches, that's where you really kind of see the decrease come into play as well. But by doing the 2 double crochet on the very first round, and then this next round, we're skipping this space and working a 3 double crochet between those 2 and skipping the next space, that will eliminate one of the granny groups as we move forward. And that's a way to decrease it. And you really don't notice your decreases. They're not that visible, but it's a way to shape the fabric to be the shape that you want. I also have a chart in the pattern, a stitch chart that shows these decreased stitches if you are a visual person and you love charts. Now our next step is to work on the sleeve, and we have this sleeve opening all the way ready for us to come back and work the sleeves. And you'll do both the sleeves the same exact way. So I'm going to be attaching my yarn underneath the arm, and I'm going to attach to the same space that I worked 3 double crochets in when I was working this as the body. So this is where we did those chains when we were separating for the sleeve and the body. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my yarn. Now I like to work this continuously for the sleeve because that way we don't have any seam going on, and it's quite relaxing and I don't have to worry about joining. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 1, and then in the very first space, in this space, we are going to single crochet 3. The reason why is it will help even out when we go to work continuously. We'll mark that first stitch, and I am working into the base of these 3 double crochets and lining those up for just under the sleeve, only under the sleeve. You'll see why here in a minute. Now in the next stitch, working at the base of that 3 double crochet, we're going to do 3 double crochets. And this will help us even out the corners here. So when it comes to the corner, this space has already been used previously for the body stitch, but we're going to use it again because if I went all the way over to the next space, we've got quite a large gap going on. So on the corners, we're going to go ahead and place 3 double crochets, and there will be a corner here and then a corner on the other side underneath the arm. There's only 2 corners going on here. And then I'm going to go ahead and in the next space, 3 double crochet. And this is where we recognize this pattern a lot better. And we're going to work these 3 double crochet granny groups all the way around until I get back to this next corner, and I'll walk you through that. So now that I've worked back around, this is one of those spaces, once again, that we already worked into when we did the other section, but we want to go ahead and use that space and work into it as well. Plus, this really helps with that bell sleeve, that wide sleeve. I really like the wide sleeve, so it's okay to add a couple more stitches underneath here, especially with this drape. And then now for this next stitch here, we're going back to where we're working to the base of those 3 double crochets. So we're going to work 3 double crochets there. And now we're back to the beginning, but because we're going to be working continuously, we're not going to join and slip stitch. We're going to go right into that first space after those 3 single crochets. And then you can go ahead and mark the beginning of the round if you want to, but at this point now we're just going to be working continuously for the length of the sleeve. And you can see we've got a little bit of a weird spot here, but we can always use our tail end to kind of tack that in, and you will never notice that that's where we started working in the round. It's underneath the arm, but it does make it a bit easier without a seam, continuing to work just around and around, working those granny groups all the way. Now for this sleeve, continue to work it until you have about 44 rounds. I'm saying 44 rounds because this is your opportunity to customize the sleeve length. Now you could leave this as a short sleeve and not even do the sleeves at all and just do a scalloped edge instead of doing what we just did. And that's what I did on the dress, is I just left it without working any rounds here, but you could work some rounds for a quarter length or a t-shirt length and then put the scalloped edge on through the bottom of that, wherever you decide to end this. But I suggest trying this on as you go for the sleeve length to make sure that you like that length. Now, after you have made the desired length for the sleeve, which for sure you should try this on and make sure that it is the length that you want. And then you can also count the rounds and do the same amount of rounds for your second sleeve. But when you've reached the length of the sleeve that you want, it's time to add the scalloped edge. And I recommend ending the length of the sleeve underneath the arm. What I mean by that is, you know, right here is underneath the arm, so I'm going to keep it on this side just because the way we're going to do the scallop may not totally work out even for every single size. So it's a way to make it look a little bit better. The other thing I want to mention here is when you come to the end, your very last set of 3 double crochet stitches is actually going to be a single crochet. The reason why is that we'll even it out for the sleeve edge. So right now, if I stopped, you know, this height is quite tall. If the next one I do 3 single crochet stitches, it helps angle that back down and look a bit better for moving forward with that scalloped edge. Now for the scalloped edge, we are going to be working in these spaces still, but we're going to be doing a bit different than what we've done before, just to kind of add that nice curve along that edge. So in the very next space, we are going to single crochet 1, and you can go ahead and mark that as the first stitch of this round. And then in the next space, we are going to double crochet 5. And then we're going to single crochet 1 and then double crochet 5 into the next space. So that's what we're going to be repeating all the way around until we get back to that first stitch marker. So once again, in the next space, I would single crochet 1, and then in the next space, we're going to double crochet 5. And you can see how that creates that nice scalloped edge. Now that I've come back around, where we did this 3 single crochet, it's kind of hiding that next space, which is fine because we did want it to angle that down. So I'm going to work into that space and double crochet 5. And now I can fasten off my yarn and we're going to join. And I like to do an invisible join to the very first stitch in the row. You can either slip stitch to join, that's fine, or you can fasten off and do that invisible join to the first stitch of the row. Now I want to go over this invisible join just because it is my favorite join. I hope that I've inspired you to do this. This is how I like to do all my projects now. We have to weave in an end anyway. So instead of slip stitching, we're going to go ahead and fasten off our yarn, and then we are going to insert our needle into that first stitch of the round as if we were to crochet it, and then go back down through the top of the last stitch worked. And that's it. And that creates like a mock stitch here to where you can't even tell. And then you weave in your end. Now I just want to do an important note, because for some of the sizes, when we're doing this sleeve, it's an odd number of spaces. And that will only affect us when we get to the bottom here and we're doing our trim, which is an even number of spaces count to do an even trim. So what I recommend is for the sizes where we are having an odd number of spaces, do one decrease at one point, decrease one of those spaces, just so that when you get to the cuff edge, you have the correct spaces to do this evenly. Now, if you don't, what will happen is on the bottom, you're going to have like maybe 2 single crochet stitches next to each other, which is fine as well. Your scallop won't be quite as even, but if it's under the arm, it's really not that noticeable. Next, we are going to add the scallop edge along the top like we have done on the sleeves. But if you don't want to, that's fine. You don't have to. You can either single crochet or leave it as is. The first thing we're going to do is to join our yarn, and I suggest joining it at one of the sides. It'll be a little bit less noticeable, but it's honestly not going to be that noticeable at all. And we're going to go ahead and be working in these granny spaces. We're going to go ahead and join our yarn and start with a single crochet. Then we're going to go to the next space and double crochet 5. And then in the next space, we're going to single crochet 1. And that's what we're going to repeat around. In these spaces, we're going to double crochet 5 and then single crochet 1. And this is what we're going to do to repeat it all the way around. We're going to be working in these spaces. We're going to do a single crochet 1 and then a double crochet 5 in the next space. And we'll work that all the way around until we get back to the very beginning. Now, once you've worked all the way back around to the beginning, and this should come out evenly for every single size, you can go ahead and fasten off and then use that invisible seaming join. So next up, we're going to talk about making these granny squares. Now, if you want, this is not required, you can use knots to eliminate quite a few strands. So I have my beginning strand and my ending strand, but all the other strands, I used a special knot. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can simply fasten off and join a new color, and then you'll just have a few more ends to weave in when you're all done. And that's what I did when I first started. I'd have all these ends. I'd have to hand weave all these in, which is fine. I've done that a billion times before, but then I got tired of it and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use the knot trick. So I'm going to show you that one today. We are going to start this granny square by creating a magic ring. Placing our hook in that, and I like to start it with a chain 1 to get it going. Now we're going to start by working in this magic ring, doing a stacked single crochet, and this will help the beginning of it look quite seamless. And then we are going to be chaining 2 and then double crochet 3 into the magic ring. And then we will chain 2 again and double crochet 3 into that magic ring. And then chain 2, and we're going to repeat that again by double crocheting 3 into that magic ring. And then if you want to use this trick where we are going to change colors with a knot, we're going to stop right here. And this is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to get out a tape measure and we are going to cut from this point, we're going to cut 7 inches. Now we're going to grab our second color and have that ready. And we're going to take our first color and fold it over into a loop, just like so. Then we're going to take our second color, the color we want to join, up from behind into that loop. And then we're going to tuck it around the back. And this is where I like to just simply put my fingers through here. And then we're going to grab that loop. And then we're going to pull all that tight, like really tight. And then we can go ahead and grab our scissors and cut that short. That will not come undone and that knot will end up being hidden. Now we're going to go back to this magic ring and we are going to chain 2 and then double crochet 2 inside this magic ring. And you may have to adjust your tension. You'll get used to this whole knot thing as it goes. Now we're going to pull this ring closed. And this is where it gets really cool. We are going to be slip stitching into the first stitch of this round. So that's stack single crochet. If you need to mark it, feel free. And then when we yarn over, we're going to leave that knot sitting in the back, pull that loop through, and now we're ready to start the next round with our new color. Now, if it's slightly off here, that's okay. You'll see that it'll get hidden after we complete this next round. So now starting in this chain 2 space, we are going to start with a stacked single crochet. Chain 2, and then double crochet 3 into the same chain 2 space. Chain 1, and now in the next chain 2 space we are going to double crochet 3, chain 2, and double crochet 3 all into that chain 2 space. And we're going to continue that. We're going to do that another time. We're going to chain 1, go to the next chain 2 space and do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets all into that chain 2 space. Now on this last chain 2 space, we're going to once again do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And then we're going to stop right here if we're doing a knot join. So we're always going to be stopping before we do our chain 1 and our 2 double crochets into that very first chain space. So I'm going to set this down again, grab my tape measure, and a lot of times I'll just leave it sitting in front of me or on the couch and I just reach over and I quickly do a quick measurement from here to here. I grab my scissors, I cut. And now we're going to do our last color where we're going to bring in this beige. I'm going to take my color that I just fastened off and I'm going to fold it and pinch it. Bring the beige up from underneath, through that loop, around the back, and then you're just going to loop your fingers through and grab it. And then we're going to tighten it all down. And that does not come undone. So now we can go ahead and snip the excess and then continue on with finishing this. So to finish this, we need to do a chain 1, and then in the very first chain space, we're going to come over here and double crochet 2. And this is where these 2 stitches, if you have a knot in the back, it kind of covers it up. It works over it, and so that helps out nicely. And now we're ready to start the next round. So we're going to slip stitch to the very first stitch of this row. And notice this will bring in our new color here, leaving that knot in the back. And then we're going to start with a stacked single crochet and chain 2. Then we will be doing 3 double crochets into the same. We're going to chain 1, 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, and now into the chain 2 space on the corner, we will do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. We're going to repeat that all the way around, and this time we won't be changing colors, but I do want to show you how to fasten off with an invisible join. Now we are going to be double crocheting back into that very first chain space that we were working into. We're going to do those 2 double crochets into that space, and then we'll go ahead and fasten off. And we can pull our yarn through, and then I want to show you an invisible join here. We're going to go into this first chain space of the chain 2. So we're going to go into the first chain as if we were to single crochet it. So we're skipping the first stitch of the round, and we're going to pull that through, and we're making a mock stitch here on the top. And now we're going to go back down the stitch that was last worked. And we can see that we've created a mock stitch on top of the very first stitch of the round, and that helps hide it in a seamless join. Now you can go ahead and you can join this to whatever other granny square you've made. You can do multiple colors along the bottom if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to block this and come back to join later. But if you want to join as you go, you can join them and then block it as a whole long strip. So silly me, I made so many squares trying to decide what trim I wanted to put on the bottom. And in the end, because this is my 3rd time at this, I don't want to put granny squares on the bottom of this. And that's okay. I think I just like it as is. And you may as well, and you may be done at this point. But if you do want to put granny squares on the bottom like I did on my other 2 samples, I want to show you how to do that. I also want you to see the difference between blocked and unblocked. Crazy. Blocking really does make things absolutely fabulous. So I'm going to be using these 2 blocked squares. I know they're a different color, but I want you to be able to see what we're doing next. And I'm going to show you how you would join these together, and then also how I attach them on the bottom of the dress or the other sweater that was white. So I ended up hand seaming my blocks together, my granny square blocks, but you can do a slip stitch if you want. I love to give choices, but I just want to show you how I did this here. So after I did that invisible join, I'm going to move my yarn and like seam it on the back until I get to this corner, because we are going to be joining at the corner. So I'm going to put my needle through this corner stitch. So I'm not doing this corner stitch, I'm doing the far left because I'm going to be joining all the way down. So all the sides that would touch that are at this corner. And then I'm going to place my needle through the same stitch on the opposite side here, and then I'm going to pull those together. And then I'm going to come back on this side. I like to kind of come from underneath, and I'm going to go through the next stitch. I kind of go right through the middle of that stitch at the top of the stitch, and then I'm going to do the same for the opposite side and pull through. And I'm just going to keep doing that all the way down. Sometimes I like to kind of loop behind here, but I'm still coming up the next stitch through the center, and then I'm going to go through this stitch through the center. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way across. And same, like you can tell when they're lining up perfectly because I'm going to be going through a chain stitch and through a chain stitch and pulling that. And then you can also give it a little bit of a tug to tighten it up, just like so. And I'm going to do that all the way across here. And that's how I would join all of these in one long strip. And the nice thing is if you're not sure how many granny squares you will need, what I like to do to determine that is measure the circumference of the bottom. So like on the skirt, we had a lot more because we had increased. So I simply measured all the way around, and then you're going to measure one side of your square, and then you will divide the total circumference of the bottom of your garment by the square and go by the closest amount. Now, if you're halfway in between, a lot of times I like to go have more versus less so it's not pulling in. And then you're just going to simply seam it to it by pinning it in place and evening that out. But we'll get there in a second. I'm going to finish doing this to join these squares, and then I'll be back to show you how to join these to your garment. So now that we have seamed this all the way down, we can go ahead and fasten off and weave in those ends and continue to do this until we have the amount needed to go all the way around. So this will just look like a really big long belt, honestly. And then we'll be ready to attach this to our sweater, which is what I'm going to show you next. Now, when it comes to attaching this to the bottom of your sweater or dress, I highly recommend taking some pins, either some sewing pins, or if you have blocking T-pins around, these work as well too. And you're going to pin it in place. And that way, when you are stitching this together, you are keeping it very even. You know that you're not going to have too much in one place and end up with a lot of like scrunching. Now, these may not be 1 for 1 in stitch count. Most likely it will not be 1 stitch per 1 stitch, which is why sometimes we're going to be doing it where, especially on these corners, we can do 1 stitch per 2. Like we can just do 1 and skip 1, and that will help even it out. So you just want to pin it into place, and then we're going to grab our yarn and we're going to attach this with our crochet hook. However, if you want to attach this the same way we did down here by just hand seaming it, please feel free to do so. I want to show you different ways to do some attaching with when it comes to granny squares. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab some yarn. I'm going to do a contrast yarn so we can see this better. Now, when working these together, I have my yarn come from underneath. So I'm going to just place my yarn from underneath in order to join. And I'm going to insert my hook from the loop that faces the center. So if we were crocheting this, it would technically be the back loop if we had this facing us. And then I'm going to grab what would be the back loop of this side and go right through that stitch. So I like to work the back loops to the back loops. And then I'm just going to yarn over from underneath. So you can see I'm underneath here. I'm going to yarn over, and getting started I feel like is the hardest part when working these type of slip stitches. I'm going to bring it up through both of those stitches on the hook. And notice I went down the right side then the left. So like I do like to alternate that. I think it does look better as we go. So now I'm going to go down the left side, and then I'm going to go down the right side and grabbing that yarn from underneath. You can kind of see it there. I'm going to pull through all of those loops. And this does what is kind of like a surface slip stitch to join. And we're going to work that all the way around. So I'm going to do a few of these. I've used this on other patterns as well, but the reason why I like it is because it's such a nice pop. It's a really nice look. It keeps that line nice and sharp. And you can move your pins as you go. And I feel like you have the most movement in the rectangle, the squares going on here. So let's just say I wanted to skip one stitch down here. It will still look fine. So let's just say I needed to adjust this so that it lays nice and flat because it's not a 1-for-1 on stitches and I want to keep it even. I'm going to skip the next one here and go down the next one here, and it barely makes a difference into the terms of the way it looks. Notice it's still quite sharp, but that way if you need to adjust, because we might have more fabric a little bit down here that we're just going to kind of sew in, we can do so by skipping some stitches and it still looks just fine. The important thing is to keep our tension going well and keeping these lined up so that we don't have too much gathering or puckering going on. And once again, you can hand seam this. That's totally fine if you find that easier. I do find it takes me a little bit longer when I'm working this type of slip stitch to join because it's a little bit finicky pulling the yarn up from underneath, but I do like the way that it looks. And then I would do this all the way across. Now, if I were doing this for real, I guess you could say, if I were doing it in one of these colors, I would choose the color that was like either the color of the granny square or the color of the sweater. Unless you wanted to do a contrast color, that's totally up to you. It could be an additional pop of color, but it hides it really well by using the same color if you want to. And you can see how I did it here on this white one. I used the blue color to work it along the edge to join, and it looks quite nice. And I did have a little bit more, I guess you could say, fabric in the squares than I did in the white part, but I evenly did it across and it looks quite nice. Now, I also want to mention, when you get back to the beginning, when you've worked all the way around and you've worked all your squares, I like to once again do an invisible join like we have done before, like we did on the granny squares, into this first stitch with my needle. And so then an invisible join will mean we won't even know where we started or stopped. I hope you enjoy this pattern and that you can see different variations can be made from just one pattern. We can do short sleeve, long sleeve, granny squares at the bottom, no granny squares at the bottom, and we can even create a dress all with one pattern. And this is the one that showcases the short sleeves. So you could do a short sleeve sweater, and you could do it with granny squares, no granny squares, striping along the top, plain and solid. The options are truly endless. It's kind of a choose your own adventure as you go, and it's completely up to you what you want to make for your custom style. Please hit that subscribe button and come back for some more fun projects soon.